Hello, this is Virtualis the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. Today, I gambited a rook and won. Full disclosure, it was more of an opening blunder. However, sometimes it's the attitude that you take in a game of chess that matters. In this game, I opted to treat it as an involuntary gambit, so I played aggressively for the rest of the game. And it worked. I managed to use the opportunity to gain a massive initiative, claw back material, and eventually checkmate. Please enjoy! Let's start with a review. So this is chess.com's algorithm. So no, it did okay, I suppose. Accuracy of 71%. And you can see this is where I did that, that gambit of the rook. And at the end, the opponent makes a critical error, which then completely drops the game into my favor. Otherwise, we actually played quite equally. So we both had one great move, the same number of good moves, and about the same number of inaccuracies, mistakes, and blunders. Now let's have a look at the analysis. So I played black in this game, and opponent white. Opponent leads with e4. I play e5, knight f3, knight c6. Very normal, and they play bishop b5, so the Ruy Lopez. So against the Ruy Lopez, I played a Berlin defense, so knight f6, and they developed the other knight as well, so effectively transforming this into the four knights game, the Spanish variation, so basically Ruy Lopez. So you can get to this position either through the four knights first and then the bishop. In this case, we transpose from the Ruy Lopez. Now in this game, typically what I would normally do would be to develop my bishop, plant a castle. However, I was in the mood to play a more spicy game. And so I played knight d4, a direct attack on the bishop, also attacking the knight. And I thought that this would lead to a more interesting, spicy game. And apparently this is the Rubinstein counter gambit. I didn't know that, that this actually had a name. The opponent captured pawn, which I sort of expected. I capture bishop, so getting rid of that light square bishop. They capture back. And at this point, probably the best move for me would be to move one of these pawns to attack the knight. One of the knights. However, again, in sort of the mood of aggressive play, I directly captured that pawn. I knew that that was probably not the best move. But I thought, no, this would be, this might unbalance my opponent. They may not have been expecting that move. They attack with d3, which makes sense. Again, the opportunity here is to counterattack one of the knights. However, I decided to play queen e7, which is a blunder. And the reason that's a blunder is that I lose the defense of the pawn on c7. And the opponent immediately sees that with a fork of the king and rook. Now, I have to admit, that was a straight out blunder on my part. However, once I saw this, I thought, look, I'll treat it as a gambit because their knights, the opponent's knights are very, very active. If that knight captures the rook, it's basically in jail. So that's a forced move, capture, simply because, it cannot really come back out because those squares are defended by my pieces. And so trading a rook for a knight, that's okay, because that rook wasn't doing anything, and that knight was very active, and now it's been taken out of play. So potentially, the opponent loses one of their active pieces. I capture now the other knight, so now they've lost both of their active pieces from the opening. So I actually thought that this was potentially quite good for me, and I capture that final pawn with check. And looking at potentially that pawn on g2 as well. An opponent invites a queen trade. Now, obviously, that would be very good for white if they trade queens, given they're so far ahead on material. I don't want to do that, so I captured the pawn. And here they're still in the mindset of trading queens, and that was an error. So moving the rook to f1, no, it's defended by the king. I can't check again, and the queen defends the g file, has control of the g file. However, with this move, I don't have to trade queens, and I don't want to trade queens. So I moved the queen back to g4. Now, that wasn't the best move. So the best move would have been to put bishop to b4 with check. Now, what I saw was that I didn't really want to face pawn to c3, and I couldn't quite see how I would manage that. But what I didn't see at the time I made the move was if I move the bishop out, then the rook can now take control of the e file. So that would have been actually the better move. However, I didn't see that, so my thought here was that if I come back here, there was a very good chance I'll be able to capture now the pawn on c2, and then I'll be able to develop my bishop. They play bishop e3. I capture the pawn on c2. They play rook d1, which was a blunder. It's not obvious that it's a blunder. It seems to make sense from a developing perspective, moving the rook, to the center. The rook is also now defended by the king. However, this does cramp the king basically, and that potentially is risky when you've got bishops and queens sniping in a diagonal fashion. I now play bishop b4 with check. They defend with bishop d2, and I here miss a mate, a potential mate. So the potential mate here is queen back to e4 with check. The king, again, cramped in by their own pieces, has no option but to defend with queen by blocking. Queen can now capture rook on h1 with check. Queen must now move back to defend, and now rook on e8, checkmate. So that was a potential checkmate. Now, I didn't see that line, but that would have been a very, very lovely series of moves. Now, I didn't see that, and instead I thought, look, yep, I'll bring my rook into the game now. So rook e8. So that was a mistake because there was a mate 2, mate 3 available. However, I'm still doing very, very well in this position. Block with queen, that's a forced move. And here, that was my goal, to trade my rook for the queen. So, and now I have sort of regained material balance. And more than that, I have the bishop pair. I have my queen. The opponent does technically have that knight, but that knight is in jail. That knight cannot move. So effectively, I have the bishop pair and the queen versus the rook pair and the bishop. So I'm fairly sure in this position, I should be able to win, to create a mating net. I give another check. So queen e4, block with bishop. Here I move my pawn to d5. So pawn still defended by the queen. So the opponent can't just simply capture the pawn with rook with check. And now opening up the diagonal for the light square bishop, I saw a potential skewer. Potential skewer here. Now, the opponent thought for some time and did see that, so it wasn't a difficult thing to see. But now I've got queen c2 with check. Opponent blocks with bishop, and this is a pattern I noted with my opponent, that they tended to want to block with bishop rather than with the rook. So trying to block with their less valuable piece, so to say. However, this was a mistake, given that this doesn't attack my queen. They probably should have opted to trade one of my pieces for one of their pieces, because that leaves me with less pieces. The other issue here is this bishop now is actually, of course, pinned, so it can't actually attack that bishop here, and it blocks their rook from the rest of the board. I capture another free pawn. Opponent brings their rook into the center. That wasn't good. Again, the king is losing space. It's losing space, and all my attackers are diagonal attackers. Check. And I think maybe the opponent was thinking that if I put the king in check, they would open up and my queen would be under threat. However, I sort of calculated that didn't really matter because I could keep giving checks. So here, check with my light square bishop. And they move back to a dark square, check with my dark square bishop. And again, the penchant, and I sort of thought that this is what they would probably do. They prefer to block with the bishop rather than with a rook. And however, the opponent now has run out of spaces because king captures. These squares are covered by the bishop and queen. This square is covered by the light square bishop. And of course, the only space for the queen to go is in this direction, and it can't. So checkmate. If they had blocked with the rook, there would have been an escape square on e1. But anyway, I was really happy with this game. I thought it was really interesting, really dynamic. Great game from the opponent. GG. The loss of a rook by a knight isn't necessarily a critical blow. In this game, the knight was one of my opponent's most active pieces in the opening, and after it captured the rook in the corner, it was effectively in jail for the rest of the match on that square. The loss of my rook wasn't felt, while the opponent ceded their knight from play. My opponent was still winning after that move, but it required very accurate play, which can be difficult. Furthermore, this was another game where I managed to coordinate my queen and bishop pair very effectively. The psychological impact of having a queen in your territory picking off pieces with check cannot be underestimated. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.